So how do you make a hyperdoc? That's what we're going to look at today. So there is a 5-step process to creating any hyperdoc. The first step is for you to determine the learning objectives for your students. The second step is for you to think about the learning cycle that your students are going to work their way through. The third step is about how you package your hyperdoc. The fourth step is about building the workflow. And the last one is really about the design of your hyperdoc. So let's take a look at them. When it comes to number one, it's always objectives, no matter what you're doing in the classroom. The number one thing that you should be considering are your learning objectives. What are the aims, what are the goals, what are the outcomes, what evidence is there going to be that the students have actually learned something today? That is what you start with. You never ever start with tech. Never start with, oh, I saw this PD the other day about how to use insert learning. Gee, it's a great tool. I want to use that. No, that's not the way it starts. You think of your objectives, and then if insert learning works for you, you can use it. Next, you want to think about your learning cycle, and you want to make sure that your learning cycle is evidence-based. If you go online, you can actually find lots of free templates available all over the place for creating hyperdocs. A lot of those are very good in terms of the evidence that they're based on. So if there's things like explore, explain, apply, or if you want the whole 7-step process that's in the hyperdocs handbook, that is engage, explore, explain, apply, share, reflect, and then extend. Or you might want to choose something that identifies what the students already know, but then provides them with new content. You want to check that they actually know that content, then get them to apply that content in another scenario or context, and you're checking for that understanding that the student has. And then you also might ask the student to reflect. And that's personally one of my favorite learning cycles, is to identify, connect, check, apply, understand, and reflect. Next, you want to think about the packaging, and your packaging is really about what platform you're going to use. So are you going to use a Google Doc? Are you going to use a Google Slides? You might use a Google Site. You might use ThingLink, which is a really great app for creating hyperdocs as well. It's really about how you're going to package it. What are you going to use as your main platform? So even if it's Google Sites, one of my favorites that I've seen is actually My Maps, where the students travel around and they see different activities and different pictures and different things at different sites on a map. When you're thinking about your package, you need to consider questions such as how will your students use it? What are they actually going to do? If they need to write on it, then you need to give them something they can write on. So ThingLink is useless for that, right? What level of access do your students need to the document? Do they need to be able to just comment on it, maybe create some suggested edits, or do they need to be able to write all over it? Do they make videos and upload it into that document? What do they need to do with it? Finally, will students be required to click away from the document? And often with a hyperdoc, that is the case. The students will click on something on that document that will take them elsewhere, whether that be to a website, to YouTube, or to anything else that happens to include their learning. It could even be a PDF or anything. The next step is the workflow. So this is about your initiation to completion. So that is how you're going to send it out, all the way through to how you're going to have the students submit it to you. So how are you going to share the hyperdoc with your students? Is it going to go through Google Classroom? Are you going to email it to them? How are they going to get access to it? And then how are you going to interact with your students? Are you going to sit there on your computer with all the kids' Google Docs open, for example, and monitor their work? Or are you going to need to walk around the classroom because they actually need to write on something that you don't have a visual of electronically? And then how are you going to collect your student work? Are they going to submit it through a Google form? Are they maybe going to submit it in Google Classroom, or will they email it to you? Do they need maybe a paper copy? Are they going to have to print it out to submit work to you? You need to think about that. And also how many clicks the students need to have to get to what they're producing. So are they clicking on the hyperdoc, taking them to a site where they then have to click and log in, and then they need to click on a few other things to make it, and then they've got to download it, save it, take a photo of it or something, and then insert it back into the hyperdoc so that you can see it. That's a lot of clicking for a student, and so you've got to think about what actually needs to happen, and is there an easier way for them to be able to access what they need to do. We also have to think about the design, so the aesthetics here. What does it look like? This is really about number one, the readability. It's really important that your hyperdoc is readable. Okay, using a really nice font like Arial or Times New Roman that are easy to read. Don't start using Gothic fonts all the time. Students can't read them, particularly those students who are struggling with their literacy. You want to balance your text with your visuals. So you do not want to have a Google document that's a whole page of text with a couple of links. You want it to be a couple of pictures with links away to the text that they might want to read if they need to read a lot. You need to think about the theme and the color scheme and really make sure that that matches with your class, with whatever's going on. Maybe if you're studying heat, for example, you might have some warm colors in there. Or if you're looking at the 5 elements, you might have colors that match those as well. And finally, you need to think about the lesson flow. So is this going to be a one lesson hyperdoc, or is this actually going to be a whole unit hyperdoc or a section of a unit hyperdoc? How big is this going to be for students?